Kevin Quigley. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Thailand 1976 to 1979. Yeah. Let me mention my job description. I was a volunteer in a secondary school in Dansai district, which is very close to the Lao border. In my first year, my second year, I taught as a teachers training college close to where Laos and Cambodia join up with Thailand. And in my third year, I was peripatetic, kind of a wandering teacher training in the southern part of the north of Thailand. So I had 3 years of Peace Corps service. I was a young man when John Kennedy was elected, but the fact that he was an Irish-American Catholic president who had 8 siblings resonated with me. I was an Irish-American Catholic with 8 siblings. So I think that was the first inspiration, is having an Irish-American as president of the United States who was clearly charismatic and calling young people to serve. At some point I wanted to join the Peace Corps. On the application at that time, they gave us 3 choices, and maybe a little bit recklessly, my choices 1, 2, and 3 were all Thailand. Now, we know Peace Corps is a government agency, a government bureaucracy. It works in sometimes wondrous ways. And after I applied, about 5 or 6 months later, I got a phone call saying, "Congratulations, you've been accepted into Peace Corps." I said, "Great, where am I going?" They said, "Korea." And I said, "All right, that would work. I wanted to be in Asia, I wanted to be in a Buddhist country." Korea wasn't a hot spot at that time, but potentially could have been. And so I said, delighted to do that. And then a couple of weeks later, I got a phone call, one of those great moments of serendipity in life, and I was asked, I was told that the Korea program had been canceled, and would I be willing to go to Thailand? That was easy. Yeah.
And you remember arriving in Thailand?
I do, yeah. I think that moment, that first encounter, is a moment that lives with us forever. In those days, it was 2 days of travel. We stopped off in Japan overnight. I had never been in Asia before. And just arriving in Tokyo after a long day's flight, after a 4-day kind of pre-service orientation and training in San Francisco, everybody was anxious to get there, all wound up, maybe anxious about not only getting there, but also anxious about arriving there. And then we stopped off in Hong Kong, and then flew into Bangkok, arrived late at night. It was dark, and that first moment of walking out the door and feeling the humidity, feeling the smell of difference, of something so foreign from anything that I had ever encountered. I knew that I was in a place far, far away, but that first smell of difference still lives on. At that time, it wasn't standard practice that you have a host family, but I was really anxious to learn as much as I possibly could. So my group trained in a place called Kanchanaburi, which the world knows because that's where the bridge over the River Kwai was, where the Japanese had one of their death camps for the POWs during World War II. So it's close to the border with Burma, and I think by the end of the first week I'd asked the staff if I could stay with a family, and I stayed with a family maybe about 10 kilometers from the training site. And that, I think, had a big impact in terms of just quickly it's the being thrown into the pool like you were in training, that total immersion right from the start that really I think helped me quickly adjust to the Thailand area as quickly as possible.
Any specific instance with that host family?
Oh yeah, I remember that this host family had 4 girls, all under the age of 10, and they all lived in a room over top of a shop. I remember the first night, and I think earlier that day, as part of our cultural training, we had learned how to use a pakama, which is it's a piece of cloth that the Thais use for everything you can think of, for a carrying bag, for pajamas, for a towel when you bathe, for a head rag, for a tablecloth. Anything you can think of, you use. It's really a multi-purpose piece of cloth. And we learned how to, in class that day, how to use it as a changing room. And I got a very practical experience that evening when it was clear that it was time to go to bed. I think I had 5 days of Thai language at that point in time, and a lot of it was probably through sign language. And it became evident to me that the family was going to witness me getting ready for bed, and I had to change with this pakama of trying to figure out how you wrap this around you and disrobe and put on my pajamas for the night. And so that was one memorable early experience. Another is my host was an amateur Thai kickboxing Thai kickboxer, and I think in my second week he demonstrated, not with me but to me, Thai boxing, and there was a crowd that gathered. I think I probably had a foot on him, but he had probably 10 or 100 times the ability to in what we were doing, and I think the world knows a lot about Thai boxing now. They didn't know then, but the use of legs, and particularly going after shins and forearms, is something quite different from anything else that I had ever experienced. And he took great delight in having a crowd witness this demonstration of Thai boxing. Well, we had a second training in a place called Utai Thani, which during that time it was a fabulous family I stayed with. They lived on a houseboat. And so I took a little boat, their boat, and living on a raft was just a great experience, you know, getting up in the morning and taking a swim before going to training at the end of the day. Oh, also everything else goes on in this river as well, but that experience of living on a houseboat, they had a garden behind them, and I think those are the, I think for many volunteers, for me like many, that interaction with our host families, our host country nationals are the experiences that really stick with us. At the end of training, I was sent to Dansai district, very close to the Lao border, about 15 kilometers from the Lao border, in a valley where the most well-known thing about the valley of that time was they had a famous chedi or stupa, a religious monument. And that stupa was called Sisong Rak, which means the love between two countries. This town also had a ghost festival, which at that time very few people knew about, even in the country, and apparently it's now become a tourist destination where people all around the country travel to attend their ghost festival, where the people in the village dress up in masks and they're possessed, and they dance out in the streets. And like many of these things, our lives are full of remarkable coincidences. Hollywood always talks about 6 degrees of separation, but it really is 2. And 3 years ago at the Smithsonian Folklife Festival, which has 3 themes. That year, one of the 3 themes were the Mekong Basin countries, in particular Burma, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. And this festival is to highlight the culture, the language, the traditions of a place, and the Smithsonian organizes it around kind of the 10-day bookends of the 4th of July, so the end of June to early July. And they bring in performers and artisans from these places that they're featuring. Next year it's going to be on Peace Corps. It's one of the 3 themes. But that year was on the Mekong. And I went down, as I always do, to the Folklife Festival, and I was kind of poking around, and I noticed that they had an exhibit, and they had some mask carvers. And like many former Peace Corps volunteers, you have that great moment of pleasure where you encounter somebody from your host country and startle them, surprise them, that you greet them in their language, which greeting somebody in Thai is not all that common. But as I began talking to these mask carvers, it was clear not only were they from Thailand, that they were from the same province, Loei province, and the same district, Dansai district. So then we switched into the dialect, and we had this conversation of where in the district did you live? And I was able to ascertain that I lived in a house in this village, essentially what would be 3 blocks from where this mask carver lived. And here we're conversing with the great monuments of Washington around us in his language about his home in this isolated valley in one of the most rural and isolated provinces of Thailand. So you can imagine of the impact that it had on both of us, that here we have this immediacy of a connection. And we know in our community that's something that happens time and time again. So it's really, we have less than 6 degrees of separation. It's something, I think it's 2, maybe it's 3. And for me that was very poignant moment, and I was thrilled because my then 6-year-old daughter Fiona was there to see me interacting with somebody from the same village I had worked in almost 40 years before.